George Rudé was a convert to communism, and therefore a threat to the peace and security of the realm. Victim or villain, he was made to pay for it, or so legend has it. He was arrested for disorderly behaviour during the Battle of Cable Street, which was an anti-fascist demonstration in London in 1936. He was under MI5 surveillance. He was effectively dismissed from teaching at a public school because of his communist activities. He was unable to obtain a university position in Britain despite being eminently qualified, or so the story goes, and was forced to pursue his calling as a historian abroad. This is hardly the track record of a person of respectable standing in the community. Now, the adjective respectable and the noun respectability do not carry neutral meanings. The connotations through the 1950s and beyond were those of properness, propriety, probity, all of which imposed a crushing conformity. The acidulated disapproval and censure of any perceived deviance from expected norms of respectability is a stereotype, but not far removed from reality, as evidenced in the saying, "What will the neighbours think?" Seen in these terms, George Rudé was not within the pale of respectability. Yet Rudé, born in 1910, was brought up in a genteel and respectable and middle-class environment. He attended an English public school, Shrewsbury, and on another scholarship went up to Cambridge to study modern languages. He graduated in 1931 with an upper second class degree and immediately commenced teaching modern languages at a public school. In England, the public school is a private school. It's well enough known that a chance visit to Russia in the summer of 1932 converted somewhat conservative Rudé over to communism. Actually, he only joined the Communist Party of Great Britain in mid-1935, 3 years later, after reading the Marxist classics in a period of deliberation. In short order, he became an active functionary with an involvement in several party committees, as well as being arrested and fined £5 part in the Battle of Cable Street, coming under MI5's observation. There were two developments in the 1940s. One was academic, that Rudé enrolled as an external student at the University of London and completed a second BA, this time in history, again achieving an upper second. He then embarked, while still being a school teacher, on a PhD, again at the University of London, under the supervision of Alfred Cobban, on the Parisian wage-earning and insurrectionary movements 1879-1791. A second development came that fateful day in June 1949, when he was called to the headmaster's office at St. Paul's School where he was working. The school knew about Rudé's communism, but turned a blind eye because he never preached the creed in the classroom or the staff room. But it was a different matter when a horrified parent lodged a formal complaint after witnessing Rudé on a street platform wearing a party placard. He was given the ultimatum: either cease your party activities or tender your resignation. Adamant that he would not turn his back on the party, he was let go. Thus begins the legend of George Rudé as martyr. Actually, it was not as bad as it sounds. The headmaster was sympathetic, not wanting to lose a good teacher and an agreeable colleague, and it was amicably agreed that he would leave in good order. The headmaster went out of his way to write a reference on behalf of Rudé that would not disqualify him from further employment, not mention Rudé's communism. And in fact, Rudé continued school teaching throughout the 1950s. But those were the years of the height of the Cold War, and communist academics were regarded in a very unfavourable light. They were not academically or politically respectable. Rudé's friend and co-author Eric Hobsbawm bitterly complained that what made the rhetoric of Cold War's liberals so intolerable was their conviction that all communists were simply agents of the Soviet enemy, and their denial that any communist could therefore possibly be a member of good standing of the intellectual community. Yet despite his communism, Rudé was building a sizable reputation as author of articles in respectable mainstream historical journals. Moreover, his priorities were changing, and he was putting more effort into himself rather than his spare time going into the service of the party. Nor was he an active member of the historians group of the Communist Party. Neither was he involved in Past and Present, the journal that emerged from the activities of the historians group. But this was not enough for his former PhD supervisor, Alfred Cobban. There is a persisting narrative that Cobban was angered by Rudé not resigning from the Communist Party after the Hungarian uprising of 1956, resulting in Cobban blackballing Rudé from any university position in England. In this way, Rudé had to seek university work abroad, and eventually, in 1960, was exiled to Australia. It's a plausible enough allegation, given the climate of the warfare, of the Cold War, given Cobban's anti-Marxism, and the extent to which communist and even Marxist historians were viewed with distaste and suspicion. But as James Friguglietti, who's written extensively on Rudé, has pointed out, formal proof against Cobban has never been formally offered. Recently, Pamela Pilbeam has closely examined the evidence there is. Cobban certainly excluded Rudé from his seminar in late 1950, but no evidence has come to light that he blackballed Rudé. In all likelihood, Rudé was sore about being excluded from Cobban's seminar, for which there is direct evidence, but it was not in Rudé's nature to hold grudges. They made up to the extent that Rudé was a contributor to Cobban's Festschrift volume. What does puzzle is that Cobban is renowned for being supportive of his students, yet as editor of History, which is the journal of the Historical Society, he never published any of Rudé's work. Yeah, there must have been a rumour going around at the time about Cobban, otherwise Olwen Houghton would probably not, in 1964, have asked Rudé directly whether he was denied a university job in England, to which Rudé answered, "What jobs?" There were indeed few such jobs on offer before the expansion of the British university system in the 1960s. Relating the events of 30 years later, of the events of 30 years earlier, Houghton also remarked that Cobban was very helpful to Rudé securing a position at the University of Adelaide in Australia. Cobban was not one of his referees, and there's nothing in Rudé's appointment file to suggest any sort of input from Cobban. They were still left a little up in the air. Whatever happened in England, there's no doubting that Rudé's communism resulted in him missing out on 2 jobs in Australia, before securing a senior lectureship at the University of Adelaide, whereupon his academic career immediately prospered. He was appointed to the 2nd chair of history at Adelaide in 1966, went on to further full professorships at Stirling, Flinders and Sir George Williams universities. Now, the Australian equivalent of MI5, ASIO, was dismayed that Rudé had slipped under its guard and been appointed in Adelaide. ASIO agents came on the campus and warned Rudé that he would likely lose his job if he stepped out of line, but they need not have worried. Although he didn't resign from the Communist Party of Great Britain, he never joined its Australian counterpart. As with school teaching in Britain, Rudé was not in the business of indoctrinating students or peddling his views in the staff room, as ASIO's informants soon related to their masters. He never denied his Marxism or his communism, neither did he flaunt it. As one of his academics told me, you'd never have known he was a Marxist from talking to him. Rudé quickly assumed high standing and definite respectability in the then conservative atmosphere of 1960s Adelaide. Part of the reason may have been because he kept his head down and was uncontroversial. There was no political involvement in his path. He did not write for newspapers nor go on radio to express his views, nor were his views sought, unlike Eric Hobsbawm, whose defense of communism put him under severe attack in some quarters. Instead, what Rudé did was to pour his energies into his being an academic, and indeed, the 60s and the early 70s were the most productive period of his career. He did give behind-the-scenes support for the anti-Vietnam War movement, very much behind the scenes, and by that time, the anti-war movement was becoming respectable itself. It helped also that he was greatly liked and an extremely pleasant person. You'd have had to have worked hard not to have liked George. He was anything but an academic street fighter, and his non-confrontational persona belied the image of the dangerous communist. On one of his research trips to Hobart, Rudé encountered the same Vice-Chancellor who had helped lock his appointment at the University of Tasmania a few years earlier. Afterwards, the Vice-Chancellor pulled the history professor aside, namely Douglas Pike, University of Adelaide, and said in tones of amazement, "But Pike is a gentleman," struggling to comprehend that a communist could fit such a description. Well, Rudé was highly principled. To give just one example, he was placed in an awkward position in 1968, having accepted the chair of history at Flinders University in Adelaide, but not yet arrived. Soon after, he was unexpectedly offered a chair at St. George Williams University in Canada, which was a preferable appointment to his mind. Rather than going straight away to Sir George Williams, Rudé insisted on a delayed arrival, even if it meant him not getting the job. He felt honour bound to give Flinders at least 2 years, and it was agreed that there would be no announcement of the Canadian professorship until Rudé had sorted things out with settled matters in Adelaide. He also stipulated that he could not arrive until the finish of the Flinders academic year in December 1970, meaning that somebody else in Canada would have to take his classes in September until the end of that year. You wonder how many others in the same position would have done the same decent thing. So, although Rudé didn't intrude on the public domain, the extent to which this dangerous communist was a recognised and respectable figure in Adelaide society impressed on me as a third-year undergraduate student when he delivered a public lecture at Flinders University in September 1969 on the study of revolutions. It attracted a capacity crowd. I was surprised at just how powerful a drawing card he was, and even more surprised at the composition of the audience, who looked decidedly upper middle class and even upper crust, decidedly radical. There was no doubt that he was nothing if not respectable. But then, we argued that the affable and principled George Rudé had never been other than respectable. Thank you.